It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Milsey, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of $50 Upgrades, the show where I give you my proposed $50 upgrade to the Commander Precon in question. Today we're talking about the Endless Punishment Precon for Duskmourn, headed up by Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. This deck, I think, is a ton of fun. Want to get your opponents to lose life on their turn to put a counter on Valgavoth, draw you a card, and start to grow it to be a threat. We're going to take our $50 and really focus on adding more things that are going to ping our opponents during their turn when they draw cards, play spells, have creatures come in. Really just focus on getting as many of those pinging types effects as we can. And then what we're going to do is try to find a couple more value payoffs for when our opponents lose life. But at the end of the day, the goal is to get more damage on our opponent's turn so that whether Valgavoth's out or not, we're still dealing damage and affecting the board for our opponents. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about every card that I'm adding. We'll go briefly over the cards I took out. I'll make some kind of notes where I feel like it's important. And then I'm going to play a playtest or two with my upgrades into the deck so that you can kind of see what it would feel like, as well as the link to the deck list with my adds and removes is going to be down in the description below. But let's get into it. What are we looking to add? Well, a lot of what we're looking to add, like I said, is finding more ways to ping our opponents for damage. Burning Earth is an enchantment that says whenever a player taps a non-basic land for mana, it deals 1 damage to that player. This is a way to really start punishing 3 and 4 and even a lot of 2-color decks for having non-basic lands and using them for mana, making sure we're going to be trying to guarantee a Valgavoth trigger on everybody's turn. Chandra Awakened Inferno is a really fun planeswalker, because when it comes down, you can +2 it to give everybody an emblem with at the beginning of their upkeep, they take a damage, meaning Valgavoth will automatically trigger. Not only can you do that, but Chandra risks a small board wipe, dealing 3 damage to each non-elemental creature, and the -X can get some single target damage if you need it. Demonic Console is a card in the deck that just feels right. Search your library for a demon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. This is going to become a little bit more prevalent on the next slide of why I'm playing Demonic Console. But if we have Delirium, we can just go tutor for anything. But we're playing Demonic Console because, well, there's a couple demons in the deck we really like. One of the main ones that I think fits our strategy really well is Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin. This is a commander that cares a lot about what Valgavoth cares about, and I think it feels great as a companion or a secondary commander for our deck. Flying and Trample, whenever one or more opponents lose exactly 1 life, you put a counter on it, exile the top card of your library, and you can play that card into your next end step. Ob is going to pair really well with Valgavoth because a lot of our pingers deal 1 damage. Now, the difference between, I think, if you took a look at my brew that's up on the channel now, where I went a little bit above this budget and upgraded it some more, as I'm taking my 1 mana pinging triggers and I'm trying to double or triple or add damage to them, which is not going to trigger Ob Nixilis. But I think I'm okay with that because we want that damage through. We want to spread it out. We want to get it going. But if you care more about dealing 1 damage to your opponent and getting profit every time you deal just 1, then I think Ob is a great choice to spin this deck towards, to pay attention with that there. Pestilence is an enchantment that for 1 black mana can deal 1 damage to each creature and each player. This is going to make sure that as long as we have a black mana up, we can trigger Valgavoth on anyone's turn, dealing damage to them and getting that trigger. I also like Pestilence because you can start knocking out those 1/1 tokens by just dealing damage to and trying to get them out of the way. Razorkin Needlehead is a 2-mana 2/2 that says whenever an opponent draws a card, it deals 1 damage to them. Here's a great way to make sure we get a Valgavoth trigger every turn, if possible, dealing at least 1 damage, if not more, if our opponents start to draw more cards. Rolling Vortex on the start of every upkeep deals the damage to that active player, making sure that on everybody's turn, we're going to be triggering Valgavoth. Yes, we'll take a damage on our turn, but that's a-okay because we're going to make sure we get it for all of our opponents. And then we get the extra brighter that if a player casts a spell and no mana was spent to cast it, it deals 5 damage to them. This is going to help shut down all those Cascade and Discover decks, dealing damage to them as well. Solfim plays a great role here, doubling the amount of damage that would be dealt to a permanent or player that we would do non-combat wise. This is great for all these pingers that are dealing for 1 or 2, that now becomes 2 or 4 with Solfim out. So it's a great, and it can also protect itself by pitching a couple cards and putting a indestructible counter on it. Terminate, just adding a teeny bit more removal to the deck, especially cheaper removal. I love removal, but we want our removal to be cheap because we're going to be a deck that's trying to play a lot of things down, to deal this damage. We may really only be able to keep 1 or 2 mana up at the end of our turn, and I think Terminate's a card that fits what we're trying to do for that. Torbrand takes any damage a red source we control would deal and just adds 2 to it. This is a really great ability to take those 1 mana that Razor can diz or things like that and add a couple more. No, it won't affect like something like Underworld Dreams beside it, but that's okay. Torbrand's still an important effect that I think is going to help us out a ton. Underworld Dreams is another one of the key pingers we want to see because it says whenever an opponent draws a card, deals the damage to them. Again, here's a way to get Valgavoth to trigger on everybody's turn. And even if Valgavoth's gone, they're still taking that damage. Unholy Annex and Ritual Chamber is a card that just makes a ton of sense considering our commander is a demon. So on the Unholy Annex side, it says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. If you control a demon, each opponent loses 2 and we gain 2, otherwise we lose 2. No, Valgavoth doesn't trigger for us doing this life loss on our turn, but I think that's okay because 2 damage is something in the grand scheme of things. Especially when you start to pair it up with all of these, pingers that are dealing 1 or 2 a turn to our opponents. And then on the chamber side, we can just get a 6/6 demon for 5 if we really need to. Or if Valgavoth ever gets removed and we don't want to start taking damage to the annex, but we want to draw cards, we can use Ritual Chamber to get another demon. We do have other demons in the deck. It's not like Valgavoth the only demon that we have access to, but it is important to have some backups just in case. Victimize is a card to me that feels right for a deck like this. Reanimation is always important in black because there are so many great creatures that you want to get back from your graveyard. But the reason I think Recursion is really important in this deck is Valgavoth draws you a card every time your opponent's effects go off. So a lot of times I've noticed in playtesting the deck that you start getting turns where you're untapping with 8 or 9 or 10 cards, and you may really only be able to play 1 or 2, or you only might want to play 1 or 2. Which is going to force you to start discarding down to hand size. But what's really nice about that is then you can seed these big creatures into your graveyard. If I recall correctly, this deck comes with Reanimate in the main board. I apologize if I'm wrong about that, but I think I'm remembering that correctly. If not, you can add more of these recursion style effects of getting creatures back from your graveyard that you pitch to hand size or were destroyed by card effects. Like, this is something that I just think is really important and is something our opponents may know that we can do but may not expect, depending on if they're focusing too hard on Valgavoth. I can see a world where you seed a couple really good creatures in your graveyard. Someone gets rid of Valgavoth, but they can't stop, the other things that you could have laying in wait in your graveyard. And then Withering Torment's just a great card for a deck like this. It's a 3-mana black instant that destroys target creature or enchantment and you lose 2 life. This may seem really odd because we have way better cards to destroy creatures. The important line on this is enchantments, which black has a very hard time doing in Commander. Same thing with red. You're in 2 colors that have a very tough time getting rid of enchantments, and so Withering Torment does it. There's another card in this deck that does it in Feed the Swarm. The difference between Feed the Swarm and Withering Torment is Withering Torment just loses us 2 life, whereas Feed the Swarm loses us life equal to that permanent's mana value, which could be very tough when you start to destroy either big creatures or big enchantments. I like Withering Torment because 2 life is really well worth the extra mana that I have to pay for it versus Feed the Swarm for it to be at instant speed and me to use it at the right time. Well, as far as our removals go, I know there's always going to be people that are going to agree with me what I chose to pull out of the deck. At the end of the day, I pulled the cards out because I wanted to try to focus our strategy just a little bit more on what we're trying to do. If I can, I upgraded certain ideas or certain strategies in the deck, but at the end of the day, Precons tend to have filler. They tend to have cards that can either be upgraded exactly in slot or taken out so that we can have more copies of a similar ability. Again, my goal is to get as many of these pingers in as possible. To be honest, I looked at a card like Blood Pact and I was like, I think Valgavoth's going to draw us enough cards. In a deck like this, I think we're going to have enough card draw that I'm not worried about spells that can draw me cards that way. But if I wanted to, I think I'd rather do something like Deadly Dispute or something that gets me the card draw but also nets me a treasures. I'm in red, so I have access to things like Faithless Looting and Thrill of Possibility and these cheap red draw spells that I don't have to pay life to do. That's kind of where I'm out on the black draw spells in this deck because I think the red ones are just strictly better, and I don't really understand why I would pick those over those. But I get it. It's a Precon, and it's going to have certain things. To create pain, I'd much rather play Blasphemous Act or pay the money to play something like Damnation, which just got that reprint. I get why it's in here, but again, we have way cheaper board wipes that we can play, even black board wipes that are cheaper than this, that I would rather upgrade in slot 2. Florian, I'll admit, is a card I actually liked. At the beginning of your second main phase, you can look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponent's lost this turn, and you can exile and play it this turn. It's a good effect. I just don't think it's what the deck's trying to do. I'd much rather double and triple down on our pingers and make sure they're there to get in good damage and make sure they see real effect. Enchanter's Bane is, I'll admit, a card I actually really like the look of. At the beginning of your end step, target enchantment deals damage equal to its mana value to its controller unless that player sacrifices it. This is a really great way to get rid of enchantments. If your playgroup plays a lot of Enchantress-style decks, keep Enchanter's Bane in the deck. Otherwise, I'd rather keep my removal focused on the things I expect to see more of, artifacts, creatures, playing, artifacts and creatures, or just creatures in general. I think of the cards I remove from this deck, Enchanter's Bane might be the one I'd be the most willing to bring back in. And if that's the case, I'm sure I could find another card to remove it. But this is where it's tough to make these guides and always feel like you have the exact right answer. I'm just trying to give you, my thoughts on it. I love Sadistic Shell Game. I think it's a really fun card. I just think it's going to end up biting us in the butt, especially if Valgavoth's out. Valgavoth is going to get destroyed. Now, if Valgavoth isn't out, I'd rather pay the 4 mana just to nuke the board. I like the idea of this card. It's just not for me. I know it will be for somebody. It is for you. Enjoy the card. I just think for this precon, we're better off getting some better removal. Sign in Blood, same thing as the other draw spell, Blood Pack, or something like Night's Whisper. We have better draw. I think Stormfist Crusader is a card that some people are going to like because each player draws a card and loses a life. We can pay it off with things that when opponents lose life on our turn, but I'd really rather not give people the cards if I don't have to. I'd really rather focus on the pingers for the things that people are already going to do anyway and take real advantage of them. Again, Tectonic Giant's another card I really like. Whenever it attacks or becomes the copy of a spell our opponent's control, we can ping each opponent for 3 or exile the top 2. This effect makes a ton of sense, but again, I'd rather play a pinger that's an enchantment that's going to be harder to take off the battlefield rather than a creature that's going to be easy to. And then my hatred for Temple of False God continues. It's an okay land, but it tends to trap people. Our deck has plenty of lands. I'm not worried about Temple of the False God, but I can understand why you'd want to play it. I just think there's way better lands you can play over it. Our commander isn't that expensive. If our commander was 8 mana, I could understand it, but it's not. Let's get into a playtest. This is something that I always do on my Millsy Brews series, and I thought, why not do more of it here? I've put all the cards from our upgrades into it. Let's play through a playtest or two, just trying to understand how we would build up the deck, how we would go about it. So keep it a 3-lander here with Massacre Girl, a really great piece of removal. Blasphemous Axe, we got 2 great pieces of potential mass removal. Rolling Vortex, there's one of our pingers. And then Grab the Prize, which is a very interesting card. Pitch a card, draw 2. If the discarded card wasn't on land, we deal 2 damage to each opponent. This, to me, is already strictly better than Sign in Blood or Night's Whisper, to me personally. Like, you're getting damage to your opponents, you're pitching a card, which, let's be honest, we're in black, we can reanimate things. Like, to me, I'd much rather have this red draw spell of an ability, especially when you use things like Big Score or Unexpected Windfall to make treasures as well. To me, I value it more than that lose 2, draw 2. But I feel like, right, every player's their own. So let's get into turn 1. We draw Bloodseeker. All right, well, here's another one of our great pingers. We're going to start working towards getting our pingers down. I want to get them down, before Valgavoth, so that way the turn I play Valgavoth, let's see, I draw 4th land and I play Valgavoth on turn 4, we could start getting those triggers on that turn cycle. Turn 2, we'll get that Graven Cairns down. By the way, so happy that Graven Cairns got a reprint in this precon. It was probably one of the more expensive filter lands. The blue-black one's still sitting way up there. But I think it makes more sense to play the Bloodseeker here than the Rolling Vortex. No need to take an extra damage right now, or 2 if I don't have to. But I do like the idea of the Rolling Vortex. Turn 3. We see Seance board. It says at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, put a counter on it. We can add a mana of any color, add X mana of any color where X is the number of counters on it. I think it's a great idea for a card, but the problem is if I can't get a creature to die, then it could just sit there and do me nothing. So the question is, do I play something like Seance Board this turn and hope the creature dies? Or do I go with a sure thing like Grab the Prize to try to dig a little deeper for another land? We already probably have a chance of Valgavoth triggering next turn, right? If I can play it down. And, Bloodseeker's probably going to be the thing. Let's do that. I think I'm going to try to spin the Grab the Prize. I have lots of great pingers. I like the idea of Seance Board, but if I know I'm against an Aristocrats deck or something like that, I might keep it. But otherwise, I think I kind of want to just try to hit that fourth land, and we did. So now we can play Valgavoth next turn no matter what. Pass and come back, turn 4, play Valgavoth down. And look at it now. We got all these pingers. We got Underworld Dreams. We got Burning Earth. We got Roiling Vortex. These are going to start working together to deal 2, 3, 4 damage to each of our opponents on their turns and just start getting that damage in. And now we'll pass. So whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, we're going to have that player lose a life. And that's going to trigger Valgavoth. Let's say for the purposes of this playtest that just 2 opponents had creatures come in. It probably is going to be all 3. But let's say for the purpose of this, just 2 of them did. I think that's fair. It's a fair average. And I think it lets us just start to, again, see what the play pattern is of the deck. So we'll come back to our turn 5 with now 2 more lands in hand. Unfortunately, well, that's right. Smoldering Marsh will come in untapped. Geothermic Bog is going to come in tapped. So the question is, what would we want to play if I put in my untapped land this turn? I mean, Frostodon is good. I really ideally would love to get Underworld Dreams down. And I could put a red into this for double black and use this black to play Underworld Dreams. So if I do that, I've got a red and a colorless left for maybe something like Roiling Vortex. Feels good. We're now back underneath the hand size. We don't have to discard down. Our opponents are taking guaranteed 2 damage every turn now, no matter what. Even if they remove my creatures, 2 damage is getting put through. Now we know that for sure coming back to our turn that we're going to draw 3 cards unless somebody gets rid of Valgavoth. So we'll come back to our turn 6. Unfortunately, we're going to have to play that tap land, but that's A-okay. 5 lands. We did take a damage from Roiling Vortex, but that's okay. We could wipe the board if need be, but I really don't want to. Valgavoth's big and it's finally in the air. Kind of like the idea of Burning Earth just to keep getting that damage to our opponents. But we could also do something like Soulfim to keep the pressure on, doubling up that opponent. It does say a source would deal non-combat damage. This deals damage. This deals damage. So these are both dealing damage, whereas this is having them lose life, which is not technically damage. The thing I like about Soulfim here is I go 1, 2, 3, 4, leave a mana up. Because the way that Soulfim's bottom ability works is it says I can pay 1 and 2 Phyrexian red mana to discard 2 cards to put an indestructible counter on Soulfim. So if somebody tries to wipe the board, what can happen is I can pay this 1 mana and 4 life instead of those 2 life for each of those Phyrexian symbols. Give Soulfim indestructible. It's going to stay around. These are going to stay around. And now this little combo is going to stay on the battlefield even if they get rid of Valgavoth. I think this is kind of a good point to stop. I think we've kind of presented what I'm trying to do with the deck, and we'll move on to playtest number 2. But I think it just goes to show you what I mean by getting the pingers set up, getting that kind of rudimentary design going and letting it work. Here we're keeping a 2-lander with Arcane Signet and Mindstone, so a little bit of ramp there. We got the Unholy Annex. Great card for that draw. Soulfim again and Grab the Prize. Interesting that we saw all of these a second time, but A-okay. We'll get the Swamp down here turn 1. Moving to turn 2. I think we go Shadowblood Ridge into Arcane Signet just so we could start ramping. If we draw an untapped land, we can get Valgavoth down, but I'm actually not even opposed to going, Mindstone in to Grab the Prize to draw some more cards. We don't necessarily need to get Valgavoth down as soon as we can, because remember, we don't have the pingers set up to really profit from Valgavoth just yet. So turn 3, we'll put that Geothermal Bog in tapped, because it has to come in tapped. I'll go Mindstone using these 2. And I've got 2 mana. I mean, I can either Grab the Prize or I can go Seance Board, right? These are my 2 options. I like Seance Board if I actually think things are going to die. But if I don't really honestly see things dying at least quickly this game, I think I'm kind of willing to pitch the Seance Board to Grab the Prize, deal the 2 damage to each of my opponents, and hey, we drew another land, At the end of the day, I think drawing the cards and churning through a deck and finding things are important. And I like this because then if I draw something I can pay for 2 mana, I can play Valgavoth and that. Or we could take a turn to set up, playing Annex and something else. There's ways we can do it here, but again, don't feel rushed to play Valgavoth exactly as soon as you can play it, because remember that it doesn't do us any good until our opponents are efficiently losing life. Like Fate Unraveler would be great to play right before Valgavoth, because then we're guaranteeing that everybody takes a damage. So we could Unraveler into Blood Artist, we could Unholy Annex and Mayhem Devil, try to get some more card draw off of the Unholy Annex. The problem is I can't Unraveler and Valgavoth at the moment. I'd need another land to do that. I think I could Fate Unraveler, maybe leave up to 2 mana, make my opponents think I have something in my hand, or I could run out the Blood Artist. It's either or. My gut tells me, bait the 2 mana, make people think I don't have it. What I can also do here is draw off this Mind Stone if I really need to, right? Pay the 1 mana to draw off it. I don't know that I want to, but it leaves it as an option depending on what you see. But we'll go into turn 5 here. We didn't draw anything fancy, but that's okay. We'll play Valgavoth for 4. I think I'll play the Blood Artist as well. Now everyone's losing a card damage guaranteed. So again, as long as nobody removes Valgavoth, we're drawing 3, right? And getting that ability. If anything dies, we have a chance to get some extra life loss in. But again, not bad. We're untapping on turn 6 with Valgavoth as a 7/7. Up to 7 mana with the ability to increase that this turn. If I go Felwar Stone, Thought Vessel, then giving me no maximum hand size, I can actually play Sulfim, right? 1 in that for Felwar Stone, and 1 of them for the Thought Vessel, and we have 2 red sources open. And the way that I'm looking at this, let's see, I had 7, 2 for the Felwar Stone, down to 5, but up to 6. I should have enough to keep 1 mana up to protect Sulfim, but now everybody's losing 2 instead of 1 to the Fate Unraveler, which is nice. Again, if nobody responds or deals with Valgavoth, we would have attacked last turn with Valgavoth. Now we're coming into turn 7 with a bunch more cards in hand. Play a land for turn, and here Suspended Sentence is kind of interesting. Destroy target creature opponent controls. That player loses 3 life, and then we exile it with time counters on it, and it can go down. It goes down 1 every turn until it goes off again. Kind of like the idea of like the Arsonist and the Annex to draw us that extra card. And again, now I think we're at the point where we've set up our board pretty good. We got the pingers down. We've got the sport cards down. We're at that point where if somebody tries to wipe the board, we can protect Sulfim, let the rest of it go. If we need to, we have some chance to draw some other pingers, as we get through our deck. I think we're in a safe spot, and now people really got to deal with Valgavoth because it's going to start becoming a big problem. But let me know, what do you think of my $50 upgrade for Endless Punishment? I'd love to hear what you did to your Precon. Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to chat about it, and I'll catch you guys next time.